Hello everyone. So I was working on this Microsoft Excel sheet for a client for the purpose of training to one of the teams of a prospective client with whom I am working. And I thought to share this with all of you. It's an important, mini size, you can say small size, but knowledge packed, insightful module for containing or having all 15 categories, details of all 15 categories of scope 3 emissions, right? So the category wise, we have 15 categories here, category 1 to 15. Then we have the definition, very small bit size definition for all of you to understand what, say, for example, category one of emissions are all about, right? What is considered, what is not considered, what they mean. And then in column C, we have type of emissions. Is it an upstream or a downstream? So that categorization, upstream and downstream categorization. Then what are the sources, emission sources say, category one of emissions? Because, this is the important you can say source of information which we need as an input when we calculate these emissions, scope 3 emissions. So category wise emission sources, what are the sources? Then data sources. Data source is also important because you want to know as an organization where you're getting your data from, how accurate the data is, how complete the data is, right? And all of you, or some of you, if you have dealt with scope 3 emissions, know about scope 3 emissions, availability of data, availability of reliable data, complete data, or accurate data is one of the main pain points, right? And then the calculation approach, what calculation approach you will follow or adopt. And then in the last column G, because in the original sheet we have a lot more columns and data and other things, but yes, for education purpose, for all of you to know in an open forum, this is sort of complete table, provide you a complete picture of how you can move about it, how you can go move forward, right, in order to calculate. So it's a, you can say, a starting point, a good starting point, a base. So effort, what is the effort of collecting the data or calculating the emissions overall, you can say. So number effort is high. High means you need high effort. It's not very easy to get the data, to get or to calculate the emissions, because we will talk about it category wise. So category one is your purchase goods and services, or raw material that you purchase. So we can understand this through an example of a manufacturing industry. Most of the industries come under manufacturing industry because you are anyways most of the time manufacturing something. You go to FMCG, you're manufacturing FMCG products. You go to iron and steel, it's a manufacturing industry. Coal, manufacturing industry. Then there are other so many industries, electronics, pharma, all manufacturing industry. But there are service industry also. They also purchase raw materials. So it's a very important category. Category number one, which is upstream, cradle to gate emissions from production of products purchased by the company. So if you're purchasing, say for example, say you're purchasing steel, for example, you're an automobile company, you're purchasing in steel. So upstream emissions there mean extraction of, say, iron from an iron mine, then the processing of iron, conversion of iron or transformation of iron into steel, and all other factors form the upstream cradle to gate emission. So gate means your company's gate, till they enter the gate of your company, because after that they will be processed inside your company, and the emissions connected with that processing will come under your scope 1 emissions, right? Or scope if they pertain to consumption of electricity. Right? So we have category one scope, your cradle to gate emissions from production of products purchased by the company or raw material. right? So emission sources are your raw material extraction, your processing, manufacturing of purchased goods, etc. Then your primary transportation between the suppliers. So if it is going from place A to place B before coming to your gate, that will also be involved. And what are the data sources? Mostly your enterprise resource uh, planning systems, so ERP systems like SAP, like Zoho, the other systems as well. Your financial purchasing records, because those records and the bills and the invoices will have the amount of purchase and the quantity. So if you're purchasing, say, 100 kilograms of steel, you're purchasing steel worth 10,000 rupees or $10,000, so as to say. So these are the input data. Your amount and your quantity is the input data. So if, based on quantity, right? So calculation approach says mass of goods into emission factor. This is a secondary emission factor which can be available, which can be made available to you through a database, your or value of goods. So your EEIO emission factors will be used. So you can calculate either based on the mass of good purchased or the volume of good purchased, or you can calculate this based on the value in monetary value of your goods purchased. Preferable is, your activity data, which is your mass of goods purchased, and you can also try to get LCA based, life cycle assessment based emission factors for that. If your suppliers are already calculating, if your suppliers are already having that data, then you can get that, and that would be more accurate method to calculate these kind of emissions, right? Always remember. And based on the monetary value is considered as mostly least accurate method. If you don't have anything, you will have anyways amount of or say the monetary amount of the value of monetary amount in terms of rupees or dollars or pounds of the purchased raw materials, right? That data will be known to you and you can calculate based on that, but that will not be very accurate. That will not show true picture, but at least somewhat, at least you have advanced, or at least you have taken a step in that direction. Similar to category one are capital goods. They're not raw material, but capital goods means the machinery that you're purchasing. Capital goods, they in accounting treatment, they also come under the assets, mostly because there's a machinery, long list assets, machinery, equipment, buildings, vehicles, etc. So your upstream, your emissions related to those machines. Because say, if for example you're purchasing a CNC machine, you're a manufacturing company, you're purchasing a CNC machine, till it enters the gate of your manufacturing facility, right? It has incurred some emissions because it is made up of raw materials, that machinery, iron, steel, plastic will be there, rubber will be there, a lot of materials, electronic meter, sensors, etc. will be there in the machine, wiring will be there, and emissions associated with those raw materials will be taken care or taken into account for category two. Then we have category three, which is your upstream emissions from production of purchased fuels and energy, right? So you're using that fuel within your manufacturing facility or within the office that you have, right? But there are emissions involved or associated with the extraction of fuels or in generation of electricity. So those emissions will be taken into account, right? So if you're using, say, for example, petrol is drilled from the ground by an oil and gas company, right? Which is in the business of extracting the oil. So it is extracted as crude oil, then it is processed into petrol, then it is transported to your site. So all those emissions, fuel extraction and refining. So it contains only fuel extraction and refining, category three. In case of electricity, also your transmission, your generation of electricity plus transmission, T&D losses, which we call. So the electricity is coming from the power generation point of power generation till the factory through wires, your overground wires, underground wires, right? Overhead wires, underground wires, and there's some T&D losses associated. So those will be taken into account. Upstream transportation and distribution, which means emissions from transportation of purchased products between tier one suppliers to the company is they're included here. So all the fuels purchased is also going to be transported from the purchase point till or to the factory gate. So that will also be included here, right? So data sources we can see in case of category one and two, the similar kind of data sources you can get that data from your SAP or capital expenditure records, etc. Right? So you will have that data. So that's the data source. You'll go and find the invoice, right? And based on the mass produced, you have public databases. There are some open source databases which are free, right? DEFRA is one, which is also used for the same database is also used to calculate scope 1 and scope 2 emission. It also has some scope 3 category data. Then the EPA, there are other sources, and there are eco and wind and different sources. There's some paid sources as well, databases as well, right? So this is there in case of category 3, it's utility bills. In case of category 4, fried invoices. Then you have waste generated in operations. So emissions from disposal and treatment of waste from the company's operations. So this is the treatment which is happening at the third party side, right? As at the disposal point, not inside the boundary of your company. So those are also taken care into account. Now, the best way to understand, the best way to go about all these categories to first understand what is included, what does the definition say, what and in the definition also what is included, what these emissions are about, right? And understand the journey of, if there's say in case of category 1 and 2, those raw materials from the time they come into the world in the in their shape, in the present shape, till the time they reach your factory, to understand the journey, where can emissions happen, what kind of the processes are involved, right? If you have those, you can easily get the emission sources, and through emission sources obviously you will get the data sources. It's just that you should have that data. Availability of data is the main problem here, activity data, because most of the data is not under your control, right? Because you have to depend on your suppliers. So you have to make your suppliers ready, right? So that they have the data, which is the main problem, which is currently the focus of many companies. Now, category 6 is your business travel emission. So your employees travel in the whole world, right, for business dealings, for business purposes, and there are emissions associated with it. A lot of publicly available data here, and you can get the activity input data, your activity data from the sources. You can also maintain those sources internally, because if an employee is traveling, say for example, from London to New York, you will have all those details, right? What is the distance? What kind of flight he's taken, because you have booked the flight, right? And what are the emissions? So the data is publicly available with the airline. So it's not very tough to get this kind of data. Employee commute, a lot of moving factors involved in employee commuting, but you can get the data, right? It's not very difficult to get this kind of data, right? Then we have upstream leased assets, emissions from operation of assets leased by the reporting company. So this is mostly um, applicable in case if you have, say, your company is has leased any site. In case of IT companies, most of the offices, they have big offices, employees, hundreds of employees are operating, they're working from a single place, a lot of things involved, air conditioning, etc., electricity consumption. But the office is not owned by the company, it's leased by the company. Office is owned by maybe a real estate developer, right? For example, in Bangalore, we have a lot of these companies like Bagmane, we have Prestige, right? They have these offices, they lease these offices to these companies. You can get the data from there, and they all maintain the data now. They're very professional, so you get the data. It's not very tough. Then downward transportation. So now downward journey has started, because your product has been finished. Sorry, have been manufactured, it's finished. Now the downward journey has started from your factory gate to the end customer, right? Sorry. So downward transportation emission from transportation of sold products from the point of sale, which is your factory, to the uh, destination. So to a distributor, maybe to a retailer, maybe in case of D2C products, right? So those emissions involved based on the distance covered. Processing of sold products. Here, what is the kind of processing of sold products? So if your products are not the end products, right? If the product, say, if you're manufacturing a steel sheet or an iron sheet, it is not an end product. It will again be processed to make a car or something. So this category is will be applicable there. Emission of from processing of sold intermediate products. This is the keyword here, intermediate products by third parties, subsequent manufacturing steps. And use of sold products is a, you can say, a parallel category. So if you're selling end products, then emissions as a result of use of those sold products by end customer, right? So just understand the definition and you, that's the first step. So sales record, sales volume, sales record, you will have the amount of sales, you will have the volume and the mass of sales, and you have your uh, EEIO emission factor, publicly available databases as well as paid databases. You have to use them, right? If you want to know more about these databases, you can connect. Then end of life treatment of these sold products. You have, your end consumer after using the products will dispose them, will be, end up in landfill anyhow, right? So that treatment will also have some emissions involved, and that there's a process there. Downstream leased assets, if your company is in the business of leasing assets, so a real estate developer, right? Residential or commercial, mostly applicable for those. Or if you have a manufacturing capacity, you have leased portion of that capacity to another company. There's a lot of, multiple cases, but yes, you should also consider this. So this will create a complete picture of your scope 3 emission. Then franchisees, if you are in the franchisee business, right, like McDonald's, for example, right, they're a company, they have their own outlets, their franchisee model also. So you'll get the, scope 1, scope 2 emission data from all your franchisees. Tell them that you need the data. This is required as per, whatever reporting frameworks you're reporting, whatever regulations you're coming under the ambit of. And yes, they will prepare the data and they will send to you. So it's if you have the data, it's very easy. Investment, these are financial investment, mostly applicable in case of banks, in case of financial institutions, in case of, venture capitalists who invest in different companies. So they have investee companies, right? Mostly I have seen, you have your investment portfolio data, you have all, when you sign the term sheets, when you sign the agreement, when you give a company the money, then in the contract itself, you mention that you will need their scope 1 and 2 emissions data before the end or at the end of the year, so that you calculate your scope 3 emissions, and they should also follow these kind of things. So these are the, you know terms and conditions, so all companies these follow. But yeah, this is how it goes. If you say, if you're investing in very small companies, you don't have the data, right? Then, but you have your investment portfolio amount or the value of your investment portfolio, then there are different databases, there are different estimations that you can use to calculate these kind of emissions. So these are the 15 categories with very useful data, right? We can move forward. In our course, in my course, we have worked on these categories, on how, with the data itself, with the data set, with the help of data set, different data sets, how you can calculate, right? How the data looks like, what does SAP database looks like, right? How does what does a for example, in case of business travel, how the data set looks like? How will you calculate these emissions? So you have a real life flavor of calculating all these emissions. So you can go for that if you want. But yes, the purpose of this video is to make you aware so that you take your first step, you do some own research. You can also, if you want, get the data from publicly available sources if there's any, and you can start calculating. But yes, I think this is helpful for you. I hope this is helpful for you, because it's not very easily available publicly all this data. So yeah, thank you so much. You can connect with me if you want. Uh, Bye.